Right. So, you're still awake, that's fine. I'm awake too, and we've got time. There's no rush here, no urgency, just you and me, and the quiet hum of whatever screen you're looking at in the dark. And tonight, or this morning, depending on how you're counting, I want to tell you about a city called Yharnam. You might have heard of it, you might not have. Either way, that's fine. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it exists somewhere, in a place that isn't quite here, and isn't quite anywhere else. And it's a city that ran out of good decisions a long time ago. Yharnam is old. That's the first thing you should know. It's built on top of older things. And those older things are built on top of things older still. And if you follow that thread down far enough, you end up somewhere genuinely unsettling. But we'll get there. We'll get there slowly. There's no rush. The cobblestone streets of Yharnam are wide enough for carriages, and the buildings are tall and ornate in that very specific Gothic way that says someone cared a great deal about beauty once, and then something went wrong. Gargoyles on the rooftops, spires reaching up into a sky that's always just a little too dark. It's a cathedral city, a city of churches, a city that was built to be holy, and for a while, it was, sort of. The thing about Yharnam, the thing that made it famous, the thing that drew people from all over, was the blood, the healing blood. People came from distant lands to be treated in Yharnam's hospitals because the blood could cure anything, genuinely anything. Broken bones, fatal wounds, diseases that had no name. The healing blood handled all of it with a kind of quiet efficiency that seemed almost miraculous. Because it was miraculous. That's the problem. When something works that well, that completely, people stop asking where it came from. They stop asking what it costs. They just roll up their sleeve and say, go ahead. And who could blame them? That's not a rhetorical question. Genuinely, who could blame a sick person for accepting a cure? You're dying. Someone offers you a miracle. You take it. That's not a moral failing. That's just being alive and not wanting to stop. But the blood had a source. Everything has a source. And the source of Yharnam's healing blood was not the kind of thing you'd want to think too carefully about while someone was sticking a needle in your arm. The blood came from the chalice dungeons, deep beneath the city, far below the cobblestones and the churches and the foundations of the foundations. There were labyrinths, ancient ones, older than Yharnam, older than its oldest ruins, older than any living memory. The Pthumerians had built them, the Pthumerians, and I want you to sit with this for a moment, were a civilization that existed so long ago that calling them ancient doesn't really capture it. They weren't just old, they were a different kind of old. They had lived in the dark places beneath the earth, and they had made contact with beings that shouldn't be contacted. The Great Ones, that matters. The Great Ones are not gods, technically. They're something else, something that doesn't map neatly onto any category we have for describing powerful entities. They exist on a plane of reality that's adjacent to ours, just slightly to the left of where normal things happen. And they think in ways that don't resemble human thought in any comfortable fashion. They're not evil. That's important to understand. They're not good either. They're just other, profoundly, incomprehensibly other. And the Pthumerians, in their deep cities and their endless labyrinths, had found ways to commune with them, to serve them, to worship them, to bear their children, in some cases, which is exactly as disturbing as it sounds. The Pthumerians are gone now, mostly. Their civilization crumbled, as civilizations do, but their labyrinths remained. And inside those labyrinths, waiting in the dark, were things that would become very important to Yharnam's future. Artifacts, knowledge, and blood. The blood of the Great Ones, or something close to it, pooled and preserved in the depths. When the scholars of Bergenwerth, and we'll get to Bergenwerth, don't worry, when they found these labyrinths, they realized what they had. A resource, a substance that could heal, that could strengthen, that could alter the very nature of the human body, the healing blood. And Yharnam, which had been a perfectly ordinary cathedral city with perfectly ordinary problems, became a medical miracle, a pilgrimage site, a place of healing. People came, from everywhere they came, quietly at first, then in droves. The sick, the desperate, the curious. And Yharnam grew. The healing church grew with it, because someone had to administer the blood, someone had to control its distribution, and the church, well, the church understood power. That matters. The healing church understood that he who controls the cure controls the city. Lawrence was the first, or one of the first. Lawrence, who had been a student at Bergenwerth, who had studied under Master Willem, who had stood in those labyrinths and looked upon what the Pthumerians had left behind and thought, yes, this can be used, this should be used. Master Willem disagreed. Willem thought the blood was dangerous. Willem thought that humanity's path to enlightenment lay not in the blood, but in the eyes, in opening one's mind, in gaining insight, in seeing beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Eyes on the inside, he called it, which is, I'll grant you, a somewhat unsettling phrase. Lawrence left, he took the blood with him, or knowledge of it, and he founded the healing church in the upper cathedral ward of Yharnam. And for a while, everything was wonderful. The blood cured people. Yharnam prospered. Lawrence became something between a doctor and a saint. The church grew wealthy and powerful. Healing for all, a miracle in every vial. But the blood changed people, quietly, slowly. At first it was just restlessness, aggression, a sharpness in the eyes that hadn't been there before. Then it got worse. The beasthood, and that's what they called it, the beasthood, began to manifest in those who had received too much blood, or blood that was too potent, or blood that had been administered under the wrong conditions. People began to transform. Their bodies shifted, elongated, grew fur and claws and teeth that didn't belong to anything natural. They became beasts, not metaphorically. Genuinely, physically, they became beasts. Huge, snarling, violent things that stalked the streets of Yharnam and killed anything they could reach. The Beast Scourge. It started small, a few cases here and there, easy enough to cover up, easy enough to explain away as a bad batch, an unfortunate reaction, something that could be managed with better protocols. But it spread. The blood was in everyone by then. The entire city ran on it. And the scourge didn't discriminate. It took the wealthy and the poor, the faithful and the doubting, the old and the young. One by one, then in groups, then in waves, the people of Yharnam began to fall to the beast. The city burned. Not all at once. It was a slow burn. The kind where you wake up one morning and realise that 3 more neighbourhoods have gone dark, that the screaming has gotten closer, that the smell of smoke is permanent now. Yharnam, the holy city, the city of healing, became a nightmare, and the healing church, the institution that had caused this, that had administered the blood that was now destroying the population, the church did what institutions do when things go wrong. It reorganised, it created divisions, it found someone else to handle the problem. The hunters. That's us. Well, that's you technically, if you're playing the game. But for the purposes of this story, let's say it's just someone, a person, a hunter, someone who came to Yharnam seeking the blood's healing, and instead found themselves pulled into something much larger and much stranger than they'd expected. The hunters were an order, loose, informal, not exactly a club, of individuals who had been tasked with dealing with the beast problem. They carried trick weapons, enormous blades and axes, and hammers that could fold and shift and transform mid-swing. Because when you're fighting a creature that used to be a person and is now the size of a horse with claws like scythes, you need something with a bit of reach. They also carried firearms, though in Yharnam firearms were less about bullets and more about timing. A well-timed shot could stagger a beast, create an opening, turn a fight. The hunters were efficient, they were brutal, they did what needed to be done, and when they died, which they did frequently, because the beasts were relentless and the night was long, something happened that doesn't happen to most people. They woke up in the dream. The hunter's dream. This is where it gets strange. This is where the story stops being about a city with a pest control problem and starts being about something much, much deeper. The hunter's dream is a place that exists outside of the waking world. It's a small area, a workshop, a garden, a few headstones, floating in a void of pale mist and endless sky. There's a doll there, a porcelain doll, life-sized, with a gentle voice and a kind manner, who tends to the hunter and helps them grow stronger using a substance called blood echoes, the essence of life, the residue of violence, collected from every beast and every creature the hunter kills. The doll is important, quietly important. She doesn't fight. She doesn't give quests. She just cares for you in a way that feels almost too kind, too patient, too unconditional for something that shouldn't be alive. But she is alive in her way. She moves, she speaks. She watches over you with eyes that have seen many hunters come and go. That matters. In a world full of things trying to kill you, someone who simply wants you to be well, that matters. And in the dream, there is a man, an old man, sitting in a wheelchair near a great tree, in a field of flowers that bloom in moonlight. His name is Yharnam. Yharnam was the first hunter, the original. He built the workshop, the real one, in the waking world, a small building tucked away in the corner of Yharnam, and he trained the first generation of hunters in the art of beast slaying. He was brilliant, skilled, dedicated, and at some point something happened that bound him to the hunter's dream, making him its host, its keeper, its prisoner. He's been there for a very long time. Generations of hunters have passed through his dream. He's taught them, guided them, watched them die and come back and die again. And he's tired, genuinely tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away with rest, because rest isn't something the dream allows. He sits in his wheelchair, and he waits, and he watches the flowers bloom, and he wishes, quietly and desperately, for release. That matters, that genuinely matters. The moon presence brought him there, or made the dream for him, or both. The moon presence is a great one of those beings from beyond, those incomprehensible entities that the Pthumerians once worshipped in their deep cities. It's vast, it's silent. It has no face or too many faces, or a face that changes depending on how you look at it. Its motives are its own. It wanted something from Yharnam, or from the hunters, or from the dream itself, and what it wanted is not entirely clear, because great ones don't explain themselves. They don't need to. They simply are. And things happen around them, and mortals scramble to interpret those happenings as best they can. The dream is the moon presence's design. The hunters are bound to it, drawn into it when they die, unable to truly perish as long as the dream holds them. The hunt, the endless repeating cycle of night and violence, is maintained by this arrangement. Hunt the beasts, grow stronger. Echoes flow to the dream. The moon presence feeds, observes, enjoys. It's hard to say. Great ones operate on a logic that doesn't reward human analysis. But let's go back to the waking world for a moment. Because while the hunter is dreaming and dying and dreaming again, Yharnam is still out there, and its story is still unfolding, and the institutions that shaped its fate are still doing what institutions do. Björgenwerth, the college, the place where it all started. Master Willem's Academy, perched on the edge of a lake, a place of study and contemplation where scholars first descended into the labyrinths and first encountered the Pthumerian ruins. Willem taught his students to seek insight, to open their eyes to see the world as it truly was. Eyes on the inside. He believed, genuinely believed, that knowledge was the answer, that understanding the great ones was more important than using their blood, that the path to human evolution lay in perception, not in transfusion. His students disagreed. Lawrence disagreed most loudly and left to found the healing church. But others stayed, and they kept studying and they kept digging, and eventually they found something in the depths that changed everything. Or rather, they found someone, a great one, or the corpse of one, or the dream of one. The details are fuzzy, as details tend to be when you're talking about beings that exist partially outside of reality. The scholars at Bergenwerth began to experiment, not with blood, Willem wouldn't allow it, but with other things, with eyes, with the concept of eyes. They wanted to line their brains with eyes, to achieve a state of perception so complete that they could see the cosmos itself. This is, by most standards, a deeply questionable research goal, but they pursued it with genuine enthusiasm. The choir was the result, the highest-ranking scholars of the healing church, because Bergenwerth's influence had spread even into the institution that Lawrence had founded. The choir were researchers who had taken Willem's philosophy and married it to the church's resources. They had access to the blood, and they had access to the knowledge, and they combined the two in ways that were quietly terrifying. They communed directly with the Great Ones. They built instruments that could receive signals from beyond. They tried to contact the cosmos, to bridge the gap between human consciousness and whatever the Great Ones used instead of consciousness. It didn't go well. It rarely does when humans try to talk to things that don't think like humans. The choir's experiments led to some of the worst outcomes in Yharnam's already troubled history. The upper cathedral ward, where the choir conducted their most sensitive work, became a place of genuine horror. Celestial emissaries, failed attempts at creating intermediaries between humans and Great Ones. Ebrietas, a Great One left behind, abandoned, really, in the depths of the cathedral, a being of immense power and profound loneliness. The choir had found her and used her, gently, respectfully, but used her nonetheless. Her blood, her knowledge, her connection to the cosmos, above. That's a relative term in Yharnam. The cosmos is always above or beyond or just out of reach. The choir reached for it. They reached, and what they found was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Meanwhile, the churches multiplied. The healing church split, as institutions do, into factions. The school of Mensis, another order of scholars, pursued their own path to communion with the Great Ones, and their methods were less gentle than the choir's. Mensis sought to beckon the Great Ones directly, to summon them, to force a meeting between the human world and the cosmic one. Their ritual, the Mensis ritual, tore a hole in the fabric of reality, the nightmare, a plane of existence that overlaps with the waking world in ways that are difficult to describe and worse to experience. The school of Mensis achieved their goal, in a sense. They made contact, and then they became something that wasn't quite alive and wasn't quite dead, trapped in a state of communion that looked, from the outside, like a very sophisticated form of madness. The church also had its enforcers, the executioners, led by Logarius, who took it upon themselves to punish those who had strayed from the church's teachings. The choir, the school of Mensis, the executioners, the various orders of hunters. The healing church had become a fractious, sprawling institution full of people who agreed on almost nothing except that the blood was important and the beasts needed to die. And beneath all of this, beneath the politics and the theology and the violence, the Pthumerian ruins continued to stretch downward. The labyrinths went deeper than anyone had explored. The Pthumerians had built their civilization around service to the Great Ones, and their architecture reflected that devotion. Enormous ritual spaces, tombs filled with offerings, chambers where the boundary between the human world and the Great One's realm was thin enough to be crossed. The Pthumerians had queens. Queen Yharnam herself, the city's namesake, its original queen, its deepest connection to the Great Ones, was found in the deepest reaches of the labyrinths. She was pale, she was silent, she was pregnant, in a way that defied normal biology, carrying a child that was not entirely human and not entirely Great One. Mergo, the child of a Great One, the reason for much of what had happened in the end, because the Great Ones lose their children. That's the thing about them. It's not a punishment or a consequence, it's just what happens. The Great Ones are cursed, or destined, or simply structured in such a way that their offspring don't survive in the way that human children do. They yearn for surrogate children. They reach out across the boundaries of reality, looking for someone to bear their young, to nurse them, to love them. It's oddly human, for being so profoundly inhuman. They want what every parent wants. They want their children to live. That matters. Quietly, it matters more than almost anything else in this story. So, the hunter, our hunter. They arrived in Yharnam seeking healing, and found instead a city in the grip of the scourge, a network of churches and institutions, all pulling in different directions, a dream that wouldn't let them die, and an old man in a wheelchair who seemed to know more than he was saying. Gehrman told them to hunt, to kill beasts, to seek pale blood, whatever that was. The dole tended to them. The night stretched on and on, longer than any night should, because in Yharnam the night doesn't end until the hunt is done. The hunter fought through the streets, through the sewers and the aqueducts, through old Yharnam, where the beasts had been left to fester because the church had decided it was easier to burn the district than to cure it. Jura, one of the older hunters, stood watch over old Yharnam with a Gatling gun, not to protect the city from the beasts, but to protect the beasts from the hunters. He'd seen too much. He'd killed too many. He'd come to understand that the beasts were people once, and that understanding had broken something in him that couldn't be fixed. The hunter pressed on, through the cathedral ward, past the great cathedral, where the church's vicar, Amelia, gentle Amelia, who prayed before a skull and begged for guidance, transformed into a beast mid-prayer, because the blood didn't care about devotion, the blood didn't care about faith. The blood did what the blood did, and if you'd had too much, or if you were too afraid, or if the night was long enough, the beast inside you would come out. Through Hemwick, where witches gathered eyes, actual eyes, harvested from corpses, in service to rituals that were never fully explained, and probably didn't need to be. Through the forbidden woods, a place the church had sealed off because it led to Bergenwerth, and Bergenwerth held secrets that the church preferred to keep buried. Snakes in the woods, giant ones, the kind that make you question the ecosystem. To Bergenwerth itself, the college on the lake. Willem was there, if you could call it that, an old man sitting on a chair, barely alive, pointing toward the water. Beyond the lake was the unseen village, the domain of the school of Mensis, and beyond that was everything else. Willem didn't speak. He'd spent so long seeking insight, so long trying to open his eyes to the cosmos, that he'd become something that existed more in the realm of perception than in the physical world. He was still there, but he was also somewhere else entirely. The hunter fought Rom, the vacuous spider, a scholar who had been granted audience with the great ones, and had been transformed into a great, lumbering, almost comically non-threatening creature who nonetheless held the key to seeing what was really happening in Yharnam. Because Yharnam was layer upon layer of hidden truth. What the hunter saw before Rom's death was one thing. What they saw after, the blood moon descending, the world shifting, the veil lifting, was something else entirely. The Mensis ritual was happening. Mergo was crying. The nightmare was bleeding through. The hunter went deeper, into the nightmare itself, through the lecture building, a place that existed between worlds, a school for scholars who had gone too far, into the nightmare of Mensis, where the school's ritual had taken root, and where Mergo's cries echoed through a landscape of impossible geometry and hostile flora. Mikolash, the host of the nightmare, was there, a man who had led the school of Mensis in their beckoning ritual, and who now existed in a dream within a dream, endlessly pursuing communion with Kos, or some say Kosm, shrieking his devotion into the void. The hunter silenced Mergo, not by killing the child. The child was already not quite alive, not quite dead, existing in a state that defied the categories, but by ending the nightmare's hold on the waking world. The crying stopped, the blood moon faded, the night at last began to end, and then the hunter returned to the dream, to Gehrman. And Gehrman, still in his wheelchair, still surrounded by flowers that bloomed in moonlight, offered the hunter a choice. This is the ending, or one of them. The first ending is the simplest. Gehrman offers release. He'll end the dream for you. He'll sever the connection between you and the hunter's dream, and you'll wake up in the morning in Yharnam, in the real Yharnam, as if none of this had happened. You'll be free. The hunt will be over, at least for you. Someone else will be drawn into the dream eventually. Someone always is. But that's not your problem anymore. You wake up. Dawn breaks over the city. The night is done. It's quiet. It's gentle. It's a kindness in its way. Gehrman performs the severing with a grave courtesy, and you go, and you don't come back. That matters, the gentleness of it. The fact that in a world full of violence and horror, one of the possible endings is simply rest. Quietly, that matters. The second ending is harder. If you refuse Gehrman's offer, if you say no, if you choose to stay, he stands from his wheelchair and he fights you, not out of malice, out of duty, out of a desire to free you from the dream in the only way left to him. He's fast despite the wheelchair. He's skilled. He was the first hunter, and he hasn't forgotten how. The fight is difficult and sad and beautiful in the way that fights between two people who both think they're doing the right thing always are. You defeat him, and the moon presence descends. The Great One, silent and vast, wraps its tendrils around you and takes Gehrman's place. You become the new host of the dream, the new keeper, the new prisoner. You sit in the field of flowers, and the doll tends to you, and you wait for the next hunter to arrive. It could be a very long wait. The third ending is the strangest. If you've gathered enough umbilical cords, remnants of Great One births, pieces of the connection between the cosmic and the human, if you've consumed them, if your insight is high enough, when the moon presence reaches for you, you resist. You're not absorbed, you're not controlled. Instead, you fight the moon presence, the Great One that built this dream, that orchestrated this entire cycle of hunt and death and rebirth. You fight it, and you win. It dissolves into pale blood and moonlight, and the dream collapses, and you transform into something new, something that isn't quite human and isn't quite Great One. A newborn Great One. A child in a way, the child that the Great Ones have been searching for, the surrogate they've yearned for. You become what they couldn't have naturally. The doll picks you up, gently, like a baby, and she says, "Good hunter," and the screen goes dark, and the story is over. Or is it? That's the thing about Bloodborne. The story is never quite over. The cycles repeat. The hunts continue. Someone, somewhere is waking up in a clinic in Yharnam, with no memory of how they got there, and messengers are whispering to them. And a doll is waiting, and a man in a wheelchair is sitting among flowers, and the night is beginning again. But that's for another time. That's for another hunter. For now, though, for right now, let's let it rest. Let's let Yharnam be quiet for a moment. The beasts are sleeping, the churches are dark, the dream is still, and the flowers are blooming, and somewhere deep beneath the city, in labyrinths older than memory, the Pthumerians are gone, and the Great Ones are listening, and the blood is doing what the blood has always done. It's quiet now. The hunt is done, at least for tonight. You can close your eyes, you can let the darkness come, not the Yharnam kind, not the kind that has teeth and claws and a heartbeat, the gentle kind, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket and says, "Rest now. You've done enough. The beasts will be there tomorrow, and the hunt will go on, but you don't have to be part of it, not right now. So rest. Let your breathing slow. Let the story settle into the place where stories go when they're finished being told. Yharnam will still be there when you wake up. The hunter's dream will still be there. Gehrman will still be sitting among his flowers, and the doll will still be waiting, and the moon presence will still be watching from somewhere just beyond the edge of what you can see. But you can sleep. Good night, hunter. Sleep well. The dream is gentle tonight.